Hey, friends, what's going on? Today, we are going to talk about frustration. And specifically, we're going to get into looking at how do we manage and how do we mitigate the frustration that we experience on a daily basis. The reason I want to talk about frustration in this presentation is because it is the beginning of overwhelm and burnout. And you'll hear me say this often that if you feed frustration and give it enough time, it'll turn into overwhelm. And if you feed overwhelm and give it time, it'll grow into burnout. So, in order to avoid overwhelm and burnout, we've got to be able to handle frustration as we experience it. And so, we're going to take a look today at what frustration is, get really clear on it, and talk about 9 different ways that we can address it. As a matter of fact, I'm going to give you the kind of tools that you need that you can do a pretty quick check in at just about any moment you begin to experience the sensation of frustration, uh, whether it's with yourself or with some other people. So let's dive in and take a look at what we're talking about. Like I just said, that frustration are the seeds to burnout. And there's 2 kinds of frustration that you're going to experience. And then really there's 2 ways that you're going to relate to it. So let me explain this first. There's horizontal frustration, and that's the gap between your expectations and your experience. Now, if we're talking about the frustration you have with yourself, if you're expecting that you would perform or act or behave in a certain way and you're not, the difference between who you want to be and how you're behaving is equal to the intensity of the frustration you're going to experience. And if you're not closing that gap or working on that gap, then it's going to continue to grow and you're going to feel frustrated over a longer period of time. Now, frustration, horizontal frustration as it relates to other people is similar in that it's the difference between your strength and ability in doing or performing something and their strength and ability in performing something. So if you're really strong in one area and somebody you work with or somebody you live with or somebody that you're in community with, if they are not, then the difference between what you can do and what they can do, or how you do something and how they do something, the gap is equal to the intensity of frustration you're going to have with that person. And just having that level of clarity and that level of understanding and your ability to be an empathetic person, to be a problem-solving person, to be somebody that's looking to be more collaborative than in conflict, is going to help you close the gap and work better with people. So horizontal is the difference between your expectation and experience, both with yourself and with others. Okay. Now vertical frustration is a little bit different. Vertical frustration is the frustration you're going to experience because of certain strengths and abilities and experience that you have in your life, uh, as it relates to the durability of the world around you. So if you're really strong in a certain area, uh, and the context you're in, or the community, or the workplace, or whatever, isn't prepared to handle that kind of strength, and so it leaves them either with confusion or it leaves them not wanting to participate. That's going to cause you frustration. I think about it like Mr. Incredible from The Incredibles. Maybe this will be a better example for you. If you've seen the movie, you know that Mr. Incredible is he's superhuman. He has superhuman strength. And he drives this tiny little car that might as well be made of aluminum foil. And there's this scene where when he closes the door, it shatters the glass. And then he ends up picking up the whole car and he's going to throw it because he's so frustrated. Uh, and then he doesn't. But if you watch that, you'll get a really good glimpse that Mr. Incredible has an unbelievable amount of strength in a world that's not prepared for it. It's why he breaks doors and all this other kind of stuff, because he's so strong. You will find, especially as we go through this program together and we start looking at the judgment index and you begin to understand where your strength is, I'm going to point out where you're going to experience vertical frustration. So sometimes you might just be frustrated and not know why. It could be because of vertical frustration. But now that you're going to get clarity around it, you can figure out how to manage it and mitigate it so it doesn't become overwhelmed. So what I want to do is I'm going to work off the acronym FRUSTRATED, and we're going to take a look at kind of what are the 9, I call them the 9 nails in the foot of being frustrated. Now, I got this analogy from a guy named Dr. Horowitz. Um, the last oh man, decade, 10 years or so in our family, we've gone through the journey of mystery diagnosis, if you will, mystery illness, a lot of autoimmune type stuff. And what you'll find with autoimmune diseases is there's never just one. And Dr. Horowitz is actually he's brilliant. He's an expert on Lyme disease and associated viral diseases and autoimmune disorders that follow with Lyme. And I read one of his books trying to understand what was happening with some family members. And Dr. Horowitz gives this analogy of the nine nails in the foot. And essentially, it's exactly that. Picture your foot and you've got nine nails in it. Well, if you go to your primary care doctor and like, oh, I've got foot pain, they might say, oh, well, it looks like you've got really dry skin. And that might be true, right? So they pull out one nail, but you still have eight. They might say, oh, you know what I'm noticing is you got bone spurs. I'm going to send you to an orthopedist, right? So maybe you get two nails pulled out, and then you see the orthopedist, and they say, "Oh, well, you've got a tear in your Achilles tendon." Okay, there's another nail, and then you see someone else, and oh, well, you've got gout, or you've got plantar fasciitis. Oh, you've got an ingrown toenail. Oh, you've got an infection from a wound, or whatever. So the point is that you might see one or two different doctors who might only pull one or two nails out, and you're like, "My foot still hurts." Well, it's because you still have other nails associated with the pain. Um, I like that analogy because frustration is complex. And as I've been working and studying and experiencing frustration of my own, but really working through it the last 5 years professionally, I've discovered there's kind of this broad spectrum. But I love using acronyms, and so I've put in kind of what I would say these are roughly all the components or a lot of the components that deal with frustration. So here they are: fear, right? The F is for fear. You can see it: regret, underappreciated, stress, tired, reactive decisions, anger, too much, expectations, and disappointment. And so, what I want you to begin to grab hold of is that frustration is a combination of things, and it's difficult to manage because it's related to so many of areas of our life. We talked about horizontal and vertical frustration. Horizontal frustration with you is the gap between your experience and your expectation, your experience. And then you can also have horizontal frustration with someone else. And then you've got this vertical frustration just because you have certain talents or experience or gifts, and you're in a world that's maybe less durable and not prepared to handle the way that you're able to accomplish things. And so it's complex. And that's why we're working today to kind of get some clarity on it so that you can check in and begin to manage it. Now, in your week one downloads, you've got a tool that I developed called the Frustrated Dashboard. And here's a glimpse of what it looks like. I believe you can only manage what you can measure. And frustration is something we want to keep our eye on. And so, like a pilot flying a plane, they can't look at every individual system. They can't go check the oil. They can't check the fuel. They can't check the air ratio on the carburetor of the plane, or if they're flying a jet, whatever jet engines use. Um, they can't go and actually physically check that, but looking at their dashboard, they got a bunch of indicators that will tell them the health of that particular thing, or if it's working or not working. And that's what the frustrated dashboard is designed to be. It's a reflective tool for you to do a check-in monthly, weekly, biweekly, however you want to use it. I'd encourage you to use it monthly at this point. And the instructions are on there. But essentially, what you're going to do is draw a needle from poor to good on how well are you handling fear? How well are you handling regret? And then I want you to give yourself a score of the level of intensity of fear or regret in your life at that moment. So if you feel like, well, I don't really have a whole lot of fear right now, whatever that might be, whether it's medically, whatever it's professionally, whether it's relational, um, if you don't have a lot, then give yourself a lower score. But if you find yourself in a place where you've got a lot of regret and maybe you're not handling it very well, you might put a needle indicator towards the poor side, and you might say, man, I'm dealing with regret in a big way. I'm like an 8. And then what you want to begin to do is have some open communication with yourself. What is happening? Give a description of the condition that you're facing regret. And then I want you to begin to problem solve for yourself. Now, we can also talk about this on group coaching calls. But find an improvement goal. What's a step that you can take to manage or mitigate the regret so it doesn't grow and increase frustration and move on to the other things that we don't want to see in your life, like overwhelm and burnout. So this tool is going to give you an opportunity to have a regular check-in. And the more you use it and the more you get acquainted with the frustrated acronym, the more you can do this without having to have the actual tool in front of you. And that's ultimately what I want to get you to, is that you could kind of have this on-demand check-in in your life. And this is what I do in my own life. Now, when I begin to experience frustration, is to take time to look at my dashboard and figure out, okay, what's not working, and I go to work on addressing that. So in the next few minutes, I want to walk through each of the components of being frustrated, and I'm going to give you just kind of some ideas around it. Okay, these are not exact. There's some definition here. There's some kind of notes from psychology. There's some information here, but you don't have to necessarily stick to exactly what I'm telling you. You might have a lot of experience in some of these areas, some knowledge in these areas, and that's really great. What I'm trying to do is just give you an outline and a sketch of what fear is and how it would relate to causing you to feel frustrated or regret and cause you to feel frustrated. And then I'm going to ask a couple of reflective questions that hopefully will uh, spur you on to think about where and how this is showing up in your life and what you can do about it. So let's take a look at the first one: fear, an unpleasant emotion caused by the belief that someone or something is dangerous. It's likely to cause you pain or threat. And fear and anxiety have been used kind of in synonymously for a long time. Not as much anymore, because we have better understanding of that fear is real and present. Like if you're facing a bear, which I have before. I live in Southern California and hike some of the mountains in the local area, and I have actually gotten in between a cub and a mama bear, and thankfully, Mama Bear was not in the mood to take me down, and I was able to get out of that situation. But I was terrified. Very, there was a lot of fear in that moment. But fear specifically is something life-threatening. Now, this can also be medical. This can be something like that, like facing down a bear. It can be even the threat of losing a job. Any number of things. There's a lot of things that can cause us fear, but typically it's life-threatening or it's harmful. And the fear is activating the sympathetic component of the autonomic nervous system. And so this is where the brain comes into play. And our brain begins to stimulate in a way that either causes a fight or a flight response. And it's important that you would know which one you default to, because that will help you grow in your understanding and in how you relate to fear. But what's really fascinating about the autonomic nervous system is it has a lot of control over our emotions. And so understanding fear, if you're saying that you have fear, and getting a really good glimpse of what it is and where it's showing up is critical for you to manage and mitigate frustration, because fear is a component of feeling frustrated. Um, there's also this component, the fear of not being enough. And this is going to this will have to do with diving back into the past and people in your life who are authorities that either affirmed you or discredited you. Um, past critics being right. So again, there's a lot to fear. The point is that you would take time to evaluate and say, is there fear in my life right now, and at what level? So how well are you handling the fear that you experience? And are there any fear themes that you notice? Is it directly related to your work and career or finances? Is it related to relationships with family, kids or spouse? Is it related to health and well-being? Is it related to fear of driving or fear of the dark? Like what? Take some time and figure out kind of what are some fear themes that you begin to notice in your life. And then what's worked in the past that's helped you mitigate fear or eliminate fear, or move it into an appropriate place in your life so that it doesn't cause more frustration? What's worked for you in the past? Uh, okay, so that's fear. All right, next one: regret. Feeling sad over something that's happened or that's been done, especially a loss or a missed opportunity. So this, holding on to something in the past that didn't go the way that you wanted it to, or looking backwards. Think about Uncle Rico from Napoleon Dynamite, who always says if the coach had just put him in, right? He'd been an NFL star. What kind of regret is showing up? This has a huge impact on our self-esteem and on our motivation because when we get into talking about self-esteem in which would be week 3, you're gonna discover that self-esteem is not the same as self-confidence. Self-esteem is the way that you esteem yourself. And so it's how well do you take critical feedback in relationship to accepting celebration and praise and celebrating and praising your effort and yourself. That those are kind of the two sides of self-esteem. The majority of people have an unhealthy relationship with critical feedback, and they receive a lot of critical feedback from others. Regret will continue to cause self-esteem to move into an unhealthy space. And it also will pull your motivation uh, down and away from levels that will, keep you moving in the direction that you want to go. So it's really important that you begin to get a good understanding of regret. I love the movie Lion King. Uh, and there's this moment where Rafiki is talking with Simba, and they're out on the plains of Africa, and Simba is just stuck in regret for his past mistakes, and of course thinking that he's responsible for his father's death, and um, he's stuck in regret. And Rafiki says, "You can't change the past, but you can learn from it." There's a really funny scene there. So if you haven't watched in a while, go check out the movie. But uh, it's the same thing here. You can't change the past, but you can learn from it. And so learning from it allows you to become regret resistant as you grow into your future, because we're going to make mistakes. We're going to lose in some different areas. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. Um, but regret will keep you anchored in the past. And that's not what you want, especially if what you're trying to do is grow more present with family and crush it in your career. We've got to get a good handle on regret. So how well are you handling regret? And when you think about regret, what comes to mind? What instances in your past, what stories come up for you about regret? And is there a lesson now that you look back? Is there a lesson that you can learn as you look at the situation that you have regret around? Is there a lesson that you can learn that will serve you as you go forward? The next one we're going to look at is being underappreciated. And appreciation, it's the recognition and enjoyment of the good qualities of someone or something. I believe all of us want to be appreciated. And it's certainly important in our meaningful family relationships and in our friendships that we experience appreciation and we give appreciation. But my question for you is, how well do you receive praise and celebration? How well do you receive it from others? Are you somebody that kind of downplays yourself, discredits yourself, use a lot of self-defeating humor? When somebody tells you did a great job, do you say, "Thank you, I really appreciate that. I worked really hard," or is it like, "No, it wasn't that good. I could have done better"? How well do you receive appreciation from others is really where you need to start if you're feeling underappreciated. Um, and then figure out what makes you feel appreciated. What is it that someone might do that makes you feel appreciated? It's a great book, The Five Love Languages. I think that has a lot of value in this particular context. But is it that somebody would tell you that they appreciate you? Is it that somebody would uh, do certain things as it relates to the context of your relationship? Uh, that when they do those things consistently, that makes you feel appreciated? Is it, some sort of when people give you gifts or public praise? Do you feel appreciated? Um, what is it? How do you know how you feel appreciated? And then are you not being appreciated, or do you feel that someone doesn't appreciate you? This one's really important to grab hold of, because this is about getting clear on the truth of your reality right now. And only you know. You you might There are people in your life that appreciate you. I'm just going to say it like that. There are people in your life that appreciate you, but you might not feel like they appreciate you because there's an error in translation, and we're lacking some connection, or you're not picking up on the signals of their appreciation. It's totally possible. And so if you're feeling underappreciated as you're going through this dashboard exercise, really try to get a firm grasp. Is it really true that people don't appreciate you, or are you just missing? Are you missing it? because maybe you don't know how you best feel appreciated, or you're just moving so fast that you're not picking up on the appreciation that they are laying down. So here's a couple of questions. How do you appreciate and value yourself? It's going to be really tough for you to receive appreciation from others if you don't appreciate yourself. And we're going to get into that in week 2 and in week 3 and week 4. I mean, that's why we are here together, um, because when we get to the point of burnout and overwhelm, we lose self-appreciation. But it's really important for you to begin to understand, how do you appreciate and value yourself? And in what ways have you communicated your feelings of not being appreciated? So the people who are really important in your life, the meaningful relationships, have you communicated with them yet that you don't feel appreciated in a way that's not attacking and blaming, but just saying, I'm not feeling appreciated. I think you appreciate me, but I'm not feeling appreciated. And I want you to know, here's how I feel appreciated. It requires an honest conversation. And yet it is a way for you to eliminate the sensation of feeling underappreciated. And again, what we're trying to do is stop these things from growing, because if you feed them, which in this sense is just ignoring it, and give it time, can you continue to ignore it, then it will grow, and that growth will become overwhelmed. We don't want that. So work through on being underappreciated, or this sensation of feeling underappreciated. The S is for stress, a state of mental or emotional strain or tension resulting from adverse or demanding circumstances. And this one goes up and down all the time, depending on what you do. But there will be moments in your life where you have less stress, and there are moments that you have more stress. And sometimes you're responsible for it, and sometimes you're not. And it's normal to always have some stress or some pressure in your life. But there is a difference between your work side stress and life stress. Where we get into trouble is we don't differentiate or separate. And so a lot of the time we'll take work stress that belongs at work, and we will bring it home and add to life stress or home stress, because we're not differentiating and separating. And so it's important that as you take a look at this one on your dashboard, is to learn to know the difference and keep them in their appropriate spaces. Certainly you don't want to bring life stress into your workplace. Your bosses and management and the coworkers never appreciate that. And your family does not appreciate work stress in the home. And you can differentiate and separate the two. It just takes some thinking and a little bit of effort, but that's what managing your frustration, managing stress is going to do. Um, and then really the big question with stress is, do you know what your coping strategies are? Do you know what uh, things are in place for you to manage mounting pressure or mounting stress? In a lot of different pressure systems, like actual physical systems. So like there's a pressure gauge here on your hot water heater at home. That's a pressure system. On any kind of an air tank or an air compressor, also a pressure system. They have pressure release valves. And so when it gets up to 500 or 1,000 PSI, uh, that valve automatically opens and it will drop the tank to a safe operating level. Your coping mechanisms are similar in that they release pressure so that you don't explode, essentially. And here's a couple to think about. Community. Who's your community? Your tribe, your people you hang out with, you talk with. Do you have a faith-based community like a church? Do you have a community like a sports community, whether maybe it's a recreational sports league, or something along those lines? But what kind of community do you have of people that you can spend time with in order to help regulate your pressure? What kind of communication do you have with yourself and with others about stress? Do you have clarification around the things causing you stress, or about the things that are on your plate? Do you understand what they are, and where they fit in terms of, are they urgent or important or a priority or necessary, or is it something you can just get rid of? Um, Rest is critically important. We'll talk about that more, and just kind of the neurological function and what sleep does and how important it is for the brain to get rest. Exercise, again, critically important, not just for the body's ability to stay mobile and active, but you actually begin to work out stress with some of the different brain chemicals that get released. And there's tons and tons of science and real world proof to back this up, that just exercise in and of itself is a really great way to blow off steam. And I think that's why we have that kind of analogy. And then meditation and mindfulness. Do you have any meditative practices? Do you have any space where you have quiet that you can reflect and think? Critical for in terms of breathing and heart rate. Really, really powerful stuff to cope with stress. And then what about playfulness? Like, is there anything you do that's just fun? Uh, that's a really great way to relieve and alleviate stress. Here's a couple of bad ones. I've that you've experienced. I know I've experienced in my life, um, and I see all the time. But again, these are positive ones. The bad ones are going to be things like drugs and alcohol and binging entertainment, like the kinds of things that numb or try to escape, and yet they don't do anything to alleviate the stress and the pressure. That's what these things do. So that's what we want to do when we think about stress, is how are we going to alleviate it? So how well are you handling stressful things right now? What additional things are on your plate beyond a normal level that's an amount of stress? So what has been added to your plate that feels like extra pressure right now? You probably know what your baseline stress is, or your baseline responsibilities. What's been added that's creating additional pressure in your life that we can begin to handle. Okay, so that's taking a look at the S in frustrated and stressed. The next one is tired, this state of being in need of sleep or rest, like the feeling weary and kind of worn down. Tired also related to no longer feeling fresh or in a good condition. And when we're tired, especially if you're a professional, you're a parent, an entrepreneur, an artist, or somebody that's creating, um, or you just have responsibilities to other people, you know what it feels like to not be in a good condition, to not feel stress, or I'm sorry, to not feel fresh. And you know what weary is like. And so here's a couple of things I want you to think about. Self-care isn't selfish, it's about sustainability. You might have some things right now that are just taking up so much time that you're working late into the evening and you're getting up early in the morning. Um, and in the midst of that rhythm, there's no self-care and there's no nap, there's no rest, there's no break, there's no meditation or mindfulness. You just kind of continue to run, 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 because you have these things on your plate that you feel like you have to take care of in this particular way. The problem is, if you don't have high self-regard and self-care, they're two different things. They are related, but they're different. Self-regard is the value of yourself in the context of all the relationships you have. So if you have low self-regard, that means you're going to have low self-care. You're not going to be able to sustain. So you've got to find ways to have self-care. That might just mean like getting 8 hours of sleep is is self-care. Or it might be saying, okay, I have to work tonight. I had to work in the morning, I had long, whatever. Then saying that, okay, I'm going to schedule this time to just rest and kind of plug in to recharge. And there are tired behaviors and there are restful behaviors. Tired behaviors are the ones where you continue to do certain things that make you tired. And restful behaviors are the things you do that recharge you and give you rest. And so you've got to be able to look at your life and say, what do I have going on right now? More tired type behaviors or more restful behaviors? This I thought was really, really interesting from Dr. Freed, who's a professor of neurosurgery at UCLA. They did a long study on sleep and its effect on the brain and on the body and cognitive functions. But essentially, I think this really sums it up. Inadequate sleep exerts a similar influence on our brain as drinking too much. Listen, inadequate sleep, in other words, low amounts of rest or no rest, inadequate sleep exerts a similar influence on our brain as drinking too much. He argues in an article, he says, how come we don't have a test for people who are sleeping and driving or tired in driving? Obviously a DUI is a terrible, terrible thing. Well, there are plenty of people who have gotten injured and caused injury because they fell asleep driving or they were tired in driving. And so as they did studies on the brain, a tired brain is similar to a brain under the influence of alcohol. It's not how you want to live. It's more socially acceptable, but it's not how you want to live. So, how restful and rejuvenating is your sleep right now? If you find yourself tossing and turning at night, insomnia, you're not getting solid rest, you're waking up tired, I'd encourage you to begin to look into some ways that you can increase or enhance your sleep experience. And that could be everything from going to the doctor or trying some pretty all natural sleep aids, things like melatonin, magnesium, or not doing any kind of digital stimulation 30 minutes to 45 minutes before you go to bed. Read yourself to sleep. Like there's a lot of natural things you can do to enhance your rest. And I'd encourage you to begin to give it a try. How often do you feel tired and what's keeping you from getting rest? Okay. So as you check in on your frustrated dashboard, how often do you feel tired? Once or twice a week, and you can kind of explain and understand why. Um, totally get it. But if you're always feeling tired, what's keeping you from getting rest is going to be a really important question for you right now. All right, let's take a look at the next one. It's reactive decisions. This is acting in response to a situation rather than creating or controlling it. As we get into the judgment index the next 2 weeks, we're going to talk about your decision making capacity at in your work side and on your self side and the implications. But one of the things that causes a lot of frustration in people is the quick decision making, autopilot decision making. It's the shoot first and the aim later. And I hear this all the time from professionals who are in positions of power and in leadership or who have multiple responsibilities. If I had more time, I would have done that differently. And usually, whatever it is that they decided, it went pretty well. But they typically always say, if I had more time, I would have done that differently. I would have gotten a better result. I would feel better about it. The problem with that statement is it's more critical feedback. It's more regret. And um, it causes you to realize, man, I could have done a better job. I can't believe I didn't do a good enough job. So there's kind of these two components here. One is that it doesn't allow you to celebrate the good that you're doing, and two, reactive decision making is just an indication that you're moving too fast. And so it's really important to begin to pay attention to these reactive decisions. Autopilot's another way of just reactive decision. And granted, this has happened to me, and this probably happened to you too. You got in your car, you were intending to go to one place, but as you were driving, your brain got triggered and your habit kicked in, and you end up driving somewhere completely different, and you're like halfway to the wrong place, and you realize, oh my gosh, I was supposed to go here. That's a really good indication that you're in autopilot mode. And the more that we live in the reactive space, the more frustrated we're going to get. And so, how are you doing with thoughtful decision making? Are you giving adequate time and space and energy to making uh, the right decision, making good decisions? And then, what is your decision making process when it comes to big and important decisions? When you're faced with a big decision, either for work or for life, like what's your process so that you can make a good and informed decision? All right, the next one we're talking about is anger, a strong feeling of annoyance, displeasure, hostility. And certainly, we've all been angry at some point. But for some of us, there's a lot of underlying anger, and for some of us, anger comes quickly, and for some of us, anger it takes a lot to get us angry. But what's true for all of us is it can be triggered by people and or circumstances. And it can relate to a current and present issue. It might relate to a past issue that's connected or disconnected to the person you're angry with. So if you're angry with a coworker and they happen to remind you of somebody from your past, it might unfairly add to the anger toward them because you've got unresolved anger with a past uh, person or situation. And so it's critical that you process anger appropriately and make sure that it doesn't just show up kind of like to the party by surprise. So, as you think about anger and you take a look at your frustrated dashboard, what level of anger are you feeling right now or within the last couple of days? Is it present? And if it is, can you identify what's causing it? Now, it might be that, the Starbucks that you keep going to, the cafe is always closed, and that might anger you. But there's a good chance that there's something else that was already angering you before you got to Starbucks. Can you take a deeper look into your life and figure out what is causing anger. And then what patterns of anger show up in your life? What do you get angry about? Is it systems, situations? Is it people? Is it circumstances? Is it yourself? What are the patterns of anger? And in other words, what is it that makes you angry most often? Really good just to get clarity around it, again, so that you can manage it, so you can mitigate it and eliminate it from your life. And then finally, how do you process anger uh, that you have? Do you have a system? Do you have a structure? Are you explosive? Do you say it like it is right away? Is there any kind of filtering process? Do you have a way that you can come back to it? What What are the ways that you're processing your anger? And then, do you have any unresolved anger in your life? So, as you look back, what are some of the things that have been lingering for week, month, years, decades? Um, is that there? Again, if it is, we're going to get a really clear indication of what is causing frustration. And if you're in a space right now where you're experiencing burnout, remember, burnout is overgrown overwhelm, and overwhelm is overgrown frustration. And so we've got to work through the seeds of these things first. And maybe anger is it for you. And we want to get really clear on what's causing it in your life. And we'll talk more about it again in week 2 and 3 as we look at your judgment index assessment scores is going to give us a really clear picture of where some of this might be showing up. Okay. The next one is too much. The T in frustrated, too much, feeling anxious, tense, or lost with where to start with what you've accepted responsibility for. In other words, something that you've said yes to. I think of this too much on your plate, or this anxiety, as the distress of too much yes. Just got into a position where you've said yes to so many things that your plate is just overflowing. And I think about it like buffet psychology. Here's one of the things you'll know about me is if I go to a buffet, I always overeat. I don't know why. I think it's because somewhere I just figured, look, I paid for this. I'm going to get the value out of it. Um, and I think that's what happens in our lives sometimes in terms of relationships is, you know what? I'm here. I'm going to do everything I can for this person. I'm going to show every bit of my giftedness. I'm going to do everything I can so that I'll either be appreciated, um, or I will be accepted or wanted or desired or whatever it is. We might just get ourselves into a position where we just say yes too much. And where that too much and that piling on the plate contributes to anxiety is because you can only carry so much in your conscious mind and keep it right in front of you. And so things begin to get dropped down into the unconscious mind. And when they get down into the unconscious mind, your brain is saying, hey, there's something really important here. I don't remember what it is. And that begins to cause you this sensation of anxiety or anxiousness that I know I'm supposed to be doing something or something is going to happen, but I'm not sure what it is. And it creates an emotional response. This kind of electrical motion throughout your body. That's why you feel the nervousness or tight pressure, elevated heart rate. You begin to sweat. You might have tremors. There's any number of things that begin to happen when there's too much on your plate, and now you're dropping stuff in your subconscious that's causing you these sensations of anxiety. And so, one of the ways that you begin to address this is by looking at what's important right now. What's on your plate that doesn't need to be there, and what can you get rid of? So, as you take a look at your frustrated dashboard, how well are you doing with plate management? Don't be like Mike at the buffet. Don't put everything on your plate. Um, do what is necessary and what is good and contributes to the vision of what it is that you want to accomplish. And the good news is we're going to get really, really, really clear on exactly what you want over the next 6 weeks. But how well are you doing right now with plate management in terms of what you're saying yes to or what you're saying no to? And when you do say yes to things, do you know what your motivation is in saying yes? Is it that you want to feel appreciated? So you say yes? Or is it that you want to feel admired? So you say yes? Is it that you want to be recognized? So you say yes? Is it because you recognize that something's not working and somebody has to do something about it and I'm going to be the one to do it? And so you say yes? What is it that's motivating you to say yes to things? And can you discern the difference between what's important to say yes to and what's not? How do you know when you have adequate space on your plate to say yes? Do you know what kind of your benchmark is? Like you've kind of got the everyday responsibilities and everyday kind of food on your plate. But do you know when you could say yes to something else? Um, do you know that in your own life? It's a good place to check in. And is there a limit? Is there a point at which you say no? I can't do this because I've already said yes to enough things in my life. So great check-ins here. All right, let's talk about expectations, a belief that someone will or should achieve something. There's the different categories. You've got expectations for yourself, you have expectations for others, and you've got expectations from others. And one of the things that you've got to check in on is what the expectations you have for yourself are those from you because it's what you want, or have they been imposed on you by others? And so, as you take a look at the expectations you have for yourself, are they from you or are they from others? When you look at your expectations for others, are they from you and are they from a good space? Or do you have expectations of others because of what someone else has imposed on you or a belief on you about what others should be doing? And when you think about the expectations from others, are those people authoritative or relevant in your life? Are you evaluating the expectations that they're laying on you, or are you simply accepting them? You got to be able to define and clarify the expectations you have for you and for others, because this is what really gets in the way. As a matter of fact, expectations is one of the key components to the intensity of frustration that you experience. Because what I told you in the beginning was that frustration, in its simplest understanding, is the gap between the expectation you have and the experience you have. And the wider that gap, the greater the intensity. The narrower that gap, the less intensity. So it's important to begin to challenge lingering expectations. And this is going to take time. You've got to be able to sit with this dashboard. You got to be able to sit in reflective spaces and begin to evaluate expectations. So, how well are you doing managing your expectations right now? Expectations on yourself, expectations on others, or others' expectations of you. How well are you How are you doing managing expectations? And what do you expect of yourself right now? Write this out. Take a minute and when you're doing the frustrated dashboard, write out, what do you expect of yourself? And I think this is a really important question as well. Write out, what do you think your family expects of you? And it would be good, depending on the age of your kids, it would be really great to have a conversation and talk with your kids. Hey, what do you expect of mom, or what do you expect of dad? Um, and help them process and understand what expectations are. Maybe have a good conversation with them about what you expect of them, and then of course with your spouse or your loved ones. What Ask what hey, what is it? I'm just doing it. Tell them I'm doing a check in. Just what are some things that you expect of me? Don't sit them down and say, hey, I just want to give you an update on what I expect of you. That's not the way to go. If they ask and the time is right, feel free to share, as long as you have good clarity on what it is that you expect. But more importantly than that, um, is that you would ask to get clarity and say, hey, I just want to make sure that I'm meeting your expectations, in the sense of like, what is it that you really expect? Maybe that's an important conversation for you. Maybe I'm not telling you to go have it, but if you feel like you don't know and you're missing each other in communication, that might be an important conversation to have. And then, of course, what's motivating you right now? Can you dial in and do you understand what's motivating you? The last one is disappointment, sadness or displeasure caused by the non fulfillment of one's hopes or expectations. You might have disappointment with yourself because of past experiences. You might be disappointed in other people. Um, Either way, I think disappointment all is all rooted in a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset. A fixed mindset is where you're just kind of you're in a moment of thinking that you're good enough, smart enough, tall enough, athletic enough. You've been told, maybe you've been told that your whole life, or you just have this fixed mindset. Is you just kind of have this fixed bar, And if you're above the bar, you're doing really great. And if you're below the bar, you're doing really terrible and you're not worth anything. And so that's where a fixed mindset can be really, really dangerous. The opposite of that, of course, and really the better place to live is in a growth mindset where there's not a fixed bar. It's that you are living and growing, and the experiences you're having are worth celebrating or they're worth learning from. And that's a growth mindset. It's this idea, as you look back at some of the superstars in the past, Michael Jordan, who didn't make his high school basketball team, becomes the greatest of all time because he pursued growth. Um, Mozart and Beethoven weren't born playing the piano. They had prodigy level ability, but it was their willingness to practice and grow and be mentored and practice and perform that allowed them to become the greatest of all time. And so do you have a growth mindset or are you stuck in a fixed mindset? You've been told your whole life that you're smart and you're great and you're wonderful and you're so athletic and you're so this and this bar set for you that unknowingly you keep trying to reach for, but you just can't. So it creates this self-critical, defeating experience, and a lot of parents in a well-meaning way have always told their kids how great and how wonderful and how smart they are. And yet it sets us up for failure because it puts this bar way up high that's really, really hard to reach. Whereas a growth mindset identifies the hard work that's put in and celebrates the results. So where are you at as you look back on your past? And here's the thing, you can't spell lesson without loss. Try it right now on a piece of paper. I want you to spell the word lesson and not use the letters LOSS. You can't, because you can't spell lesson without loss. And certainly we've all had loss. But if we look back with growth-minded eyes, we can learn the lesson and grow forward into a really, really great future. So how are you doing managing your disappointment? Is it relevant in your life? Is it showing up in your life? And when you think about disappointment, what in your life comes to mind? It could be right now or something in the past. What comes to mind when you think about disappointment? And then what will be the long-term result of unaddressed disappointment? If disappointment is really relevant for you right now and you allow it to stay where it's at in your life, if you feed it and give it time, what's going to happen to it? So take some time and process disappointment. So that's the kind of the frustrated acronym, if you will. And again, what we want to do is manage and mitigate. We want to eliminate what we can, and we want to keep from growing what we can, because whatever you feed and give time to will grow. And so all of frustration is going to relate to yourself and to others, and certainly to your experiences. And so we've talked about the frustration gap, the difference between your expectations and your experience. And so are you clear on your expectations? Are they reasonable and realistic and relevant? Um, and there's a good chance that you might need to update your permissions. This happens with our, smartphones all the time. You got to update your permissions. You might not be giving yourself permission to challenge expectations. You might not be giving yourself permission to fail in some certain areas so that you can learn. You might not be giving yourself permission to kind of look backwards so that you can grow forward. Listen, you've got to get clear on your expectations and update your permissions. And this tool is going to help you do that. I want to close with this as a reminder, because this is the work that we're doing together. Frustration will evolve into overwhelm if we let it, and overwhelm, if we ignore it and feed it, will grow into burnout. That's not where we want to be. We're going to be people connected to our passion. We're going to have balance and agility between our work side and our self side. We're going to get present with our families. We're going to grow great families. We're going to teach our kids how to live healthy lives, and we're going to live healthy lives with our families. And so we're going to manage this frustration. We're going to mitigate it. It's okay to be frustrated. It's going to happen daily. It is okay to be frustrated. It's okay to let others know you're frustrated in a kind way, but it's okay to let others know that you're frustrated. It's best to have a plan to utilize frustration to better yourself, your relationships, and your work. That's the frustrated dashboard. It's the plan for you to use the frustration experience in order to propel you forward and deeper into relationships and into better work. So thanks for spending some time with me. Now we got a clear idea of frustration. Grab your frustrated dashboard, Head out for a little bit of time, work through it. If you've got any questions, reach out, and I'll see you on the next coaching call.